It's a fishing story. Right at the beginning, I need to tell you that I really don't know anything about fishing. Why, the biggest fish I ever caught was a pretty good-sized Spanish mackerel who took a strange notion to up and jump into my boat as I was speeding down the intercoastal waterway just south of Wrightsville Beach. There he was. I stopped the boat and turned around. There he was flopping in the back. And I went down and looked at him. And he looked at me. I don't know which of us was more surprised to be looking at each other. That would have been the only fish I'd ever caught if it hadn't been for an ill-fated 3-hour deep sea tour. I've already told you about that trip. That's the one when I caught one little fish. He wasn't much bigger than the little piece of squishy squid that I mashed onto my hook on that hot day, and my hands smelled of for 2 weeks. I can still smell it, really, in a way. I learned that day that it's a fact that when you are seasick, your face turns green. I don't know much about fishing, but you know what they say. Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll sit in a boat and drink beer all day. But Jesus knew a thing or two about fishing. If you think about it, every time in the Gospels when Jesus gets involved in fishing, why, there's a boatload of fish caught. Think about it. Correspondingly, every time the Gospels mention the disciples, fishermen by trade, most of them, fishing, they hadn't even caught a thing. Not even a renegade kamikaze Spanish mackerel did the disciples catch. So Jesus knew fishing, and he understood that the economy in Galilee was more supported by fishing than we are by the F-15Es that are flying above our fair city. So he not only understood fishing, he knew he was talking to people who understood it and appreciated it too. So it was natural for Jesus, when he talked about his mission and our mission, to use fishing for a metaphor. Did you know that Matthew and Mark both agree that the very first thing Jesus said to his disciples when he called them was, do you know it? Follow me and I will make you what? You know this from Bible school. I will make you fishers of men. That's the way we learned it. Anthropos is the Greek word. It means men, but obviously now the new versions say fishers of people. That's really more inclusive and right, but it doesn't quite have the same ring, does it? Fisher person and fisher man. But that's what Jesus says. Here's your job description. I'm going to make you a fisher of people. And then Luke, which was probably later than both Matthew and Mark, decided this story was so important he was going to expound on it a little bit. So he tells the full story of Simon's call. Did you hear it? It moved him from, at the beginning, down on his knees, cleaning his empty nets in frustration, to a catch that was so great it almost sank the boat, back down to his knees in pleading confession. I don't know who you are, but I can tell you this, I'm a sinner. Get away from me. To the very last tableau in the story. It's a beautiful tableau of a boat pulled up on the sand, and next to it is a net, and the fish are still flapping in it. And you can hear the sound of flapping in the crowd all around. The family and friends of Peter and Andrew, James and John, who are flapping their flummoxed tongues trying to make sense out of what just happened and how these boys left their business and their families just like that. Well, I don't know much about fishing, but I decided I better try to make some sense out of it. I like the shepherd metaphor more than I like the fishing metaphor. I'm not a shepherd either, but I like shepherd metaphor. But this is about fishing. So I took a notion that what I needed to do was talk to somebody who knew a little something about fishing so that I could cover up my ignorance. I reasoned I could put together a pretty simple sermon that was neat, that would apply fishing, catching fish, to catching people for Christ. You may have heard a sermon like that. You know, like this. You have to be patient when you're fishing, and you have to be patient when you're trying to draw people to Jesus Christ. See what I'm saying? I'd come up with about 5 things, maybe 3 because we've got a congregational meeting, it needs to be a little shorter today. I'd tie it all up somehow, and then we'd move on to next week. I might know a little bit more about the text next week, I don't know. I reasoned there were some good fishermen in this congregation. I thought of calling Wilson Stackhouse, but then I figured he'd be fishing. I thought of calling John Parker, but then I remembered it was tax season. Then it dawned on me that I was meeting with a fisherman on Friday. Dan Blackshear and I were scheduled to have a meeting about some church business, and I thought, aha, that's perfect, because I've heard some of Dan's fishing tales. Every fisherman tells tales. I knew for a fact that Dan had perfected that 4-count rhythm between 10 and 2 and the perfect loop of fly fishing. I knew that for a fact. So at the end of our church business meeting, I asked Dan, do you have a few more minutes so that I can talk to you about fishing? Boy, did his face light up. 2 hours later, we were still talking. No, it really wasn't. It wasn't that long. No, I said, Dan, what makes a good fisherman? I said, if you don't mind, I'm going to type. So I was typing away furious. Dan said, to be a good fisherman, you have to love it. And you have to love outdoors. That's great, I thought. That's point number 1. And then I said, and you have to be patient, right? You have to be patient. Oh, yeah, you have to be patient. I said, good, that's number 2. And then he said, and this was a good one, the joy of fishing is not just in the catch. The joy is in the pursuit. Oh boy, that's a good one. I put that down. He was getting warmed up. It's a good day fishing, Dan said, even if you don't catch a thing. Oh wow, I said, that's number 4. And then he said, to catch a fish, you have to know the fish. You have to know what the fish is hungry for. The bait out there has to look just like what the fish is hungry for if you're going to catch it. So if you're hunting a fish that eats bait fish that swim upstream, the fish on the end of your hook better look like a bait fish, and you better be pulling it upstream, not letting it drift downstream. I'm typing away furiously. If the fish you're hunting is eating the larva of flies, well, that's what has to be on the end of your fly cast too. A larva, or what looks like one. I piled up a whole page of notes thinking, man, this is going to be easy. I'll knock this thing out in no time. Thank you so much, Dan, for all your help. And then I went home to try to put it all together, catching fish, catching people for Jesus. And I started having a little bit of trouble. I wonder if you know why. Do you know why? It began to seem to me that fishing wasn't so great a metaphor for sharing the gospel after all. I mean, hey, I'm not knocking it. Fishing's great if you're the fisherman. But if you're a fish, not so much so, right? I mean, from the point of view of a fish, the coming of a fisherman is ominous. The very idea that there's someone up there who is trying to trick you into taking bait so that he can haul you onto the shore where you will slowly die, subsequently be cut up and be eaten. That just doesn't seem like fruitful metaphor for a sermon. I don't know. I got stuck. I got thinking, what couldn't this have been about shepherding? Then I got to thinking about an evangelism fishing trip I'd been on one time. It was in college. I saw a poster up on the bulletin board. It said Christian group meeting. Well, that interested me. I was a Christian. I wanted to meet other people. So I showed up at the meeting, and it was a great meeting. Nice people. And they were talking about memorizing Bible verses. They even had little kits, and you could put a Bible verse, on your mirror or whatever every day, and you could learn it. Now, I was all about memorizing the Bible, still am. I thought, man, this is great. I think I'm going to come to this group. And then when we finished, a fellow came up to me and said, what are you doing on Monday? I said, I don't know. I guess I'm studying. He said, how about coming and going with me? I said, where are you going? He said, we're going to go visit in the dorm, talk about our group. I said, sure, I guess. So we met outside the dorm. He had a list. He was a good fisherman. He'd done his homework. He knew where all the freshmen were. He had their names and their room numbers. And he said to me, now, you just watch me. You watch how I do this. All you have to do is carry your Bible and don't say anything. He said, unless the Lord leads you to say something, you don't say anything. We knocked on the first door. And he said to the stranger, you got a minute? I guess so, the stranger said. And he said, I want to talk with you about something that will change your life forever. Just like that. And the stranger said, okay. And then my mentor said, are you a Christian by any chance? And I can't remember for the life of me what the stranger said. It was either, I hope so, or I try to be. My mentor was calculating, what kind of fish is this? This may take a little bit different kind of bait. What's going to be the right bait to catch him? He said, you try to be, but you're not really sure if you are or aren't. How would you like to know beyond a shadow of a doubt, 100% sure, that you're a Christian and that when you die, you're going to go to heaven and not to hell? Would that be a good thing to you? Now, how do you say no to a question like that? As I remember, he shrugged his shoulders. But you know what? His eyes were saying, how in the world did I get into this mess? And how am I going to get these people out of my dorm room? Now, I can read body language, and so I started backing up, little steps, slowly back. But not my mentor. He was warmed up now, and he delivered the 4 spiritual laws. You know the 4 spiritual laws? They may have been delivered to you. He said, here are the 4 spiritual laws. God has a plan for your life, and He loves you. That's law number 1. Number 2, but you're a sinner, and God is holy. And so you're separated from God because He can't be near sinners. He's holy. And that means if you die, you will never be with God. That's what hell is, eternal separation from God. You're separated. That's law number 2. Number 3, Jesus is the way to overcome the separation between sinners and God. You see that here, the bridge over the chasm. That's Jesus and His cross. And number 4, all you have to do is say yes to Jesus tonight, and And you can know 100% sure that you're going to be with God for all eternity. And then he came to the close, a good salesman's close, something you couldn't say no to. Now, he said, don't you want to say to Jesus, I want to spend eternity with God in heaven and not be in hell? He was smoother than Ron Popeil selling the Ronco Vegemite. Well, the fish was caught. I think he said yes just so he could get us out of his room. My mentor counted it as a fish he caught for Jesus to be tallied up and talked up at the next meeting, which, by the way, I did not attend. Now, I have to be really careful here. Maybe there is some way that what happened that night in that stranger's dorm room did change his life and did draw him to God. If so, God have mercy on me. And it might be that somebody sitting here today had an experience like this, and it drew you to God. Well, doubly, God have mercy on me. But if that's fishing for people, I'm not good at it, and I can't charge you to do it either. I'm sorry. So you see, I was in trouble. You recognize that now. I've passed some good stopping points, and I haven't really said anything about fishing. Then I look more closely at the text. That's always a good idea. And particularly at what Luke says Jesus said to Simon. You remember Simon says, go away, leave me alone, I'm a sinner. And what Luke says Jesus says to him is, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching people alive. Now, our translation doesn't do that word justice in Greek. That Greek word is, from now on, you'll be catching people alive. So you see, that's different, isn't it? It's sort of like catch and release. When you're fishing, no fish on the sand, flapping, dying. This is a better metaphor. And then I thought about when I saw the trout hatchery up in Pisgah Forest this past fall. Have you ever been there? It's an amazing place. All these trout are swimming in concrete swimming pools. Not really pools, just narrow chambers of concrete. And there's so many of them in there that really what you see is more fish than water. It's this massive movement. And it's full of fish, brown trout and rainbow trout and some other kind of trout. I can't remember. I watched them. They were swimming, getting to the end, turn around and swimming all the way back, swimming in circles as if they knew instinctively, there is more to my life than what I have experienced so far. I wonder what it is. They were restless for it. In one of those pools, there was a man who looked like he had a vacuum cleaner. Like he was vacuuming up leaves, except it wasn't leaves. He was vacuuming up fish. You know what he was doing? He was catching fish alive. Why? He was going to take them to the river, to the life that was better than they could have ever imagined it to be. They had been swimming and hoping for this life. Now, let me ask you something. What if it were possible for one of those released trout to come back and pay a visit to the fingerlings who were still in the pool swimming around and around? Can you imagine that? What in the world could a free-wheeling trout say to all those captives? Well, you know what I reckon? He wouldn't have to say a word. Why? I reckon that freedom would have made him look so different that they would look at him and say, I don't know what happened to him, but I sure hope it'll happen to me too. I wonder if the only prerequisite for catching others alive for Christ is to display the kind of life that shows you have been caught and released yourself. So, with the fish philosophy, go out there and be present. Go out there and have fun. Show them the joy of being free. Go out there and make their day. Find ways to serve them and delight them in meaningful and memorable ways. And last, choose your attitude. How about love? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.